Okay, let's begin. I am with good friends who were very much part of the early days of the society, who knew about the origins of the David L. Bradford Award. I was on a fellows call with David and several other fellows yesterday, and we gathered to get caught up. And I was really pleased to show him and the others this, which is wonderful. So, but I was thinking about it, and I looked at this phrase, consistently demonstrated achievements over a lifetime, focusing on teaching and learning excellence. I thought about that, and I thought, well, I may or may not have, but I can tell you this. I believe there's something about our nature as teachers that is everlasting. Proof in a few moments when I get into the conversation with my friend and colleague, Jackie Fearon. And I think all of us would like to believe that learning is everlasting. Here's a quick exercise. Think quickly, if you can, of a teacher in your life, starting with preschool, who you still remember, and then think about something that she or he taught you. You don't have to put it in the chat or anything, just think. And if you have your cameras on, you can raise your hand if you tell me you actually could think of someone. So I'd love to have the cameras. Well, see, that's a bit of research. Because if a teacher comes to mind and you can associate it with not just particularly something you learned, but that feeling that that's when I realized I was learning. That's what we're all about as a society. We want to be that teacher for those learners in perpetuity. So while I may not last forever as a teacher, we can keep teaching in an everlasting stream, but we can't take for granted that's just going to happen, because we require institutions, colleges, training programs, and other things to keep us in a position where we can do that. So that's my speech. Now I want to tell you what my idea was, to put all of this to the test, because I may have to give this back if I fail. Right, Jackie? So I figured the best way that some of us who taught almost all of our time in public colleges and universities, named usually by their region, which mine was Central Connecticut State. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of us in the society who have been in the society who never did teach at a Research One school or one of the highly regarded and well-earned elite schools. We worked in a school where we could be that kind of teacher, free to be that kind of teacher. So my claim is, and now I'm going to ask Jackie, who was my student. I think, Jackie, I put you too much age. Didn't I put you back in the 90s? Was that? It wasn't then, was it?
It was. Yeah, but late 90s.
Very, right on the edge of 2000. So that's my claim, that I was there in Central Connecticut State University when Jackie was a student. And I was there because I could flap my wings and I could do different things. What do you remember about that, Jackie?
Well, I have to first come completely clean. When I went through this exercise, had someone else ask me the question on, think about a professor or a teacher that was influential in your life, hands down, you're the first person that comes to mind. And the reason why is because innovation is connected to it. And that is what I learned more than anything, is around how you have to continue to challenge yourself in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable. And that's the moment in which you're learning. And that's something that I've pulled through the rest of my career as well. But my experience in first meeting you was at Central. I was a transfer student. I had come from a, well-known, well-respected school and decided that wasn't the place for me, that I felt more at home being at Central, where I could work and be able to bring the ideas from the classroom back to my workplace. And so that was really a very important moment, a decision that I made in transferring to Central was, what is going to be the most important aspect of my education? Is it that I'm just going to purely learn the theory, or am I actually going to be able to find ways in which to bring it back to real life and apply it?
See, so that set up when I recognized that that wasn't just Jackie, but it was a very large number of the students that we taught back then, and I believe are still coming there. Many of them were working full-time or part-time. And we were teaching management, organization behavior, innovation, quality, knowledge management, all which pertained to the next moment they set foot back in that job the next day. And Jackie, I think I scared you that first few weeks, didn't I? Because I remember that now. And now will you forgive me? It's been over 20 years, please. What did you think about those first days? Because I think there's something like a withdrawal slip you were waving at me.
I remember actually it's funny how these little moments, I can't remember what I had for breakfast today, but I can remember a moment in my car and thinking to myself, wow, that guy, David, he's got a lot going on. And so I remember being in the classroom and saying, there is a lot going on here. And at moments I was overwhelmed. And then what it forced me to do was actually to be a little bit more intentional in how I was thinking about what was happening within the classroom, because I could tell I was trying to follow the bouncing ball throughout his lessons. And what was really important was that there was these moments where I saw the ball hit the ground and I said, okay, I was making that connection with what he was saying. And sometimes the ball would bounce in a different way that I didn't expect. But the time that I was learning is that I all of a sudden saw the ball bounce or hitting the ground more and more often. And again, those were my connection points to say, I need to listen to this guy. I need to listen to what he's saying. And I need to give myself permission to follow the bouncing ball, no matter where it goes, because sometimes it was scary. It was going in places where I wasn't certain where he was going to end up. But at the end of the day, that was what was the most impactful part of being a part of David's class and being a student.
Well, now I can tell you, Jackie, that I wasn't always sure where that ball was going to land either. But I think for the folks here who are wondering about the nature of teaching writ large, which I think I have lived, you don't always want to know where the ball's going to land. I can scheme it out as I did in every possible way. I put a frame around my work all the years along, whatever learning management system I could contrive or eventually arrived. I wanted to give students some sense of confidence that there was a madness behind my method. Wait a minute, my method. And so, but that's I had to be having fun, not at your expense, but I had to really build an exercise, and Joe and Joan and Judy have all done exercises, designed them, and they know that sometimes you just toss it out there and give them 35, 40 minutes. And it's wonderful to see what might come out of it. So we did that together, Jackie. But by showing you all that I had a desire to try something different with you, but B, confidence that you could adjust to it and do it. We're talking quite a while ago, but would you not see that the trajectory of your career ever since has been similar to what I predicted for everyone, which is sometime you're going to be certain and a lot of time you're not. What are you going to do with the uncertain part?
Yeah. I'll give a great example too. Back in this day, we really didn't have, the internet was just basically coming out, right? And so schools were really just going towards an electronic system of some sort. I mean, gosh, I don't know the year Blackboard was developed, but this was certainly one of the very first iterations of Blackboard. And, I remember you telling me a story many years later that you had to ask special permission from the college to even get access to it because they didn't believe in him. They didn't believe that he could do it or that it was the right platform because it was new, it was scary, it was unknown. And so there was times that you might imagine during that process that it didn't work. It just didn't, the system didn't work. The support internally wasn't there, both literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
And so what you did during that time was, you created an environment where we all had to figure it out, right? We figured it out together. I think that was an important piece. And I think one of the lessons I walked away with from your class was that connection. And this connection, by the way, is a theme throughout at this point, half my lifetime knowing David. But the connection he forced us, or he created, I should say, in some ways forced because of technology, right? But created an opportunity for us to be connecting with others that helped to really foster that environment of learning, right? We can't, us alone, we can't, we're not learners by ourselves. We learn because and through other people. Yeah. And so this type of, vulnerability that you shared by not knowing, but also bouncing up and creating new opportunities to think differently, but also saying, you know what, this isn't working today. What I want you to do is I want you to look to your guy to your right, look to your guy to your left. They're going to be the ones on your team. And this is what I want you to do.
Yeah.
So
figure it out. Exactly. And so the technology was there prior to your time coming. And then as I moved ahead in each year until 2016, when I retired, the technology became much more accessible. People then finally could access things on their phone, all of that. But what I was beginning to feel in those last few semesters was that even though I was loading it up so that we could have a blended course, a really exciting moment on the ground, and a whole lot of reading, thinking, and a whole lot of writing in the air, that it was, I was feeling like I was going to be eclipsed by that thing called the Blackboard. But let me jump back, though, to the part about writing. Because even back then, one of the reasons I kept pushing you guys toward the electronics as they existed was I wanted you to write what you were thinking, and I structured it, and everyone is going to read it. Do you remember that?
Yes. Oh my goodness. It was the scariest moment. Honestly, it was, I had forgotten about that. And part of the experience, right, was saying, how do you, as Doc described it, how do you feel about this? And I remember, again, thinking that's probably that same car ride. Why does he care about what I feel? Like, why do I need to tell him? And by the way, all these other people are going to get to read it. Yeah. And I really believe that was, again, a pivotal moment to force you to reflect that, again, we haven't gotten to where I am in my career, but that is one of the best lessons I could have possibly taken away. Because as learners, if we don't create these moments, right, these moments to take a step back and say, well, why am I doing this? What am I doing? What do I hope to achieve by this? It makes it difficult to continue to have that curiosity, to continue to drive yourself or have the motivation to want to continue to learn. And so, because you don't know where you're going, right? You don't know, you're on a bus going nowhere, basically.
We had then, and you still have now, the perfect subject: organization, humans as organizations. There's nowhere we can turn in this world, and any of you and your students as well. There's an organization, and something is happening as that organization is behaving that's having consequences on individuals. You name this category of people, but it's having consequences on the environment, it's having consequences on the cash flow, to looking at Judy, our master accountant. And so what I wanted you all to do when you were in getting that curious eye working was to recognize that almost any concept, call it a theory, that we were looking at, and we were doing quite a bit of reading and all of the usual stuff, was there. Now, take that eye out, see what you can see with it. Remember that?
Yeah, I'm thinking too about those moments when I read other people's things. And I think the interesting piece in being in business now, that accountability that was created through those activities. When you put yourself out there, right, you're also making a proclamation for whatever reason. And that also is around vulnerability. And I think the other thing it taught me was around how do I treat others as an organization, right? So if we go back to how people in this particular course we were in, management innovation was one of the courses that we were in together. Mm-hmm. And again, as humans are an organization per se, how do we not only behave in that organization, but how do we treat one another? And that was a theme that really has come through and really impacted, again, the path I chose in my career.
We could have read a dozen really well regarded articles about the team and the importance of others and the notion of learning within the teams and for the teams. And all of those are great thought pieces. Mm. But my feeling was that the behavior is what teaches the most. So in a way, I forced that interacting behavior with another notion, though, that I know you saw all the way through the time you worked in industry, which is in order to get jobs done that are on the innovative side of the spectrum, you can't figure it out all by yourself. And the more comfortable you are with showing, well, yeah, I don't know, to others, the more likely you are to find out they don't know either, and together you're onto it. And so those writing exchanges went on as a constant, no matter what else we did. Was it your class, Jackie, that I used to literally sneak out to the different work sites so you could see what we were reading about and talking about in action?
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to, really, again, having that exchange within the electronic environment, we would physically leave the classroom as a group, and we would go and we'd visit these sites. And we'd have a chance to, connect with the leaders that were within that organization. And it also just really brought it home. And so if David was sharing a particular concept, we were within the classroom environment and introducing it in that way. He would create these opportunities where we would have these exchanges, these dialogues amongst the classmates. And then he would actually pull it through into the visit that we would make with the particular organization. And he would ask similar questions and basically help us to see if you hadn't already made the connection amongst your peers, that he was helping to have the similar sort of conversation outside of the classroom around how this really comes to life when you're in a workplace environment.
Yeah, in fact, what you just said, Jackie, bringing ideas to life became really the enduring theme of each version of that innovation course that I designed after that, bringing ideas to life. To me, that's so exciting. And sometimes within the class, with the exercises we design, where we bring a concept to life in action, and sometimes just taking you out there. Now, a lot of folks I've learned have what we call guest speakers, but I never had a guest speaker. I had guest conversants, people who would come in, yes, sometimes prepared, as you always were, with some great slides. But the whole format was, students, they're not going to talk at you very long if you don't ask questions. course, I will anyway, but I was tempted not to, because here was golden opportunities. You know, someone who was a top guy at ESPN right here in Connecticut, who was going through tremendous personal changes, professional changes, the company was changing. And he was willing, he's an alum, and he was willing to come and open his kimono in a way and say, this is what it's like, guys. And one of our mutual friends and students is working for ESPN now, and she was in the class and she picked up on that. So there's another piece, Jackie. Let's talk a little. I want to brag for a moment, because I have thought of so many students that my design for teaching has helped get jobs. And when you came in one day, you remember Heather and Olivia?
Yeah, and Kristen. There was, the list is actually quite long. I literally cannot even come up with all
And
of them.
Maddie, and we could
Yeah,
go
Maddie,
on.
right. And there was a few that worked downstairs as well. Yeah, so there's again, I'll go back to this theme on connection, because this is the area where I think there's just so much opportunity for all of us in this field, is that, you know, we are seeped in our theory of around whatever it might be in terms of this OB behavior, or how we might call it within a textbook. But one of the things that I think is just a wonderful attribute that David has is being able to bring the connections all the way through. And he was the most amazing recruiter that I never had to pay, because he saw the connection with how a student was able to make and recognize within his classroom, either is not necessarily brightness. I mean, yes, certainly brightness is important, intelligence, but it was more around, did they recognize and get the concept and really, internalize it in a way that it was going to come through into a workplace. And so I knew when David came to me and said, last time we were here, we talked a little bit about, you needing this within your workplace. This woman, Olivia, is in my classroom. Here's some of the things that I'm really seeing from her work, from how she is showing up within the classroom experience. And I really think you should talk to her. And I am telling you, I think you may have gotten 100%. Like I believe that you batted 100% or 500%, whatever that stat is. But because they were already vetted, and it came through, and I was in recruiting for a period of my life. And so I'm a pretty tough, a judge when it comes to who gets hired and who doesn't. And that was a wonderful resource for me for many years. And I had these wonderful people that, ended up working, not necessarily for me. In fact, they worked, I filtered them through the organization in which I was working for at the time. But that was a really, really important point in terms of connection.
One would ask, is that a professor's role? And my answer is, why not? Now, there are ethics, and you have so many coins of the realm called credibility that you can place on a particular student if you happen to make that suggestion. So it wasn't everyone I taught, but when I did find someone who showed folks who are just listening, I'm wiggling my fingers, the energy, the electricity, the eye connection, they lean forward, when we do the team exercises, within a few minutes, you're not you don't have to be named a team leader. You just say, I think I got this. What if we try this? Let's put that on. We've all done the exercises, building towers and so forth. But there's an animation there. And what I'm thinking for my friends who are out there hiring is, boy, do you need people like this? I keep a good eye, and still do, on the trends in all form of enterprise, and whether it's a nurse or it's someone to work on operations, someone to do logistics, someone to go out and shape up a warehouse in Tennessee that's non-union. That happened to one of your classmates, John Liano, when he was only 22. Company said, go down there and organize this warehouse. I don't mean from a labor standpoint, just get everyone to follow you. And he did. And so I just love those things. We all want to list our publications with pride. I list along with those people, human beings who I have, in a sense, published in the world. Here, read this person. She is going to do the job and more. Now, let's give folks before, and I will give you a chance to interact because it's a small group. Let's give some folks a chance to learn more about what you did. Now, let me just set the scene. Before Jackie started in my class, she was painfully shy. She sat in the corner with her head down like this. But at the end of the course, ta-da, here she is. So after that, Jackie, give them a quick rundown of your bio because it's very impressive.
I will say, coming into Central, it was a different experience, right? So it's a new school. I knew no one. I did not have any connections from that perspective. And I do recall the moments where I felt lit up in the classroom, and that I attribute completely to Doc's teaching. And I'm sorry, I've always referred to David as Doc, so I apologize if I slip from time to time. And I attribute that to David's ability to continue to keep us engaged. And it wasn't just the engagement between him and I within the classroom environment, it was also the engagement with my other peers, and not even necessarily in a friendly way, which is always, of course, a wonderful way to have some friends coming out of a class. But it was these moments to really be talking about the field in which we were studying and to get ourselves immersed in it. And so the more I immersed myself in it, the more I found I enjoyed it. And so following, or I should say, on the tail end of my experience at Central, I was given an opportunity to work at a co-op, and I began my career in human resources. And within 2 weeks of my experience accepting the co-op, I called Doc. I think I may have been in tears. And I said, "What have I done? What have I done?" And my boss quit, and the other individual whom I was reporting in through had taken on 2 executive level roles and just did not have time for a 22-year-old or however old I was at the time. So long story short, I did start my career there. I stayed in human resources for many years, had every facet of responsibility within that type of realm and field, and including training, including recruiting, and ended up going deeper into both of those areas at certain times in my career. Fast forward several years later, not to give any numbers to that, and I went back into a more, I'll say, strategic HR role. And I found, there was a missed opportunity within organizations to really help their employees to learn. And not learn necessarily how to use Excel, not, learn how to use this machine or whatever it might be. It was, how can we behave in a way that makes more sense for the individual, the culture, and the business. And I found myself eventually really drawn to the field of leadership development. Mm-hmm. And that's where I did end up eventually getting my master's through all of that. And then, finding, in fact, my thesis was actually based on how do we help individuals within an organization develop themselves and develop their careers, because it really wasn't a field at the time that was really quite well known. Now, where I am is I, in fact, work with different companies on the consulting side to help develop their talent development strategy. And so it's a wonderful place to be able to understand and work with an organization to see where they are in terms of their maturity with learning, and where they want to be. And what I have found in this role is that many of them, we don't know. right? We don't know where we are today or where we need to be. And so part of my role is to help people understand where they could be. And that is a really exciting place to be. I get a chance to design, which is of course stuff I really love, to again, put organizations in a place where they can empower and create a culture of learning within themselves.
Well, you see, folks, my work here is done. Jackie's completed the picture that we started back when she attended my first class. In between, Jackie and I have done what many of you have done with your former students, who stayed in touch and looked out for each other, looked into what was going on. Occasionally helpful. I did have a wonderful opportunity to provide some coaching to Jackie when they developed this really innovative embedded learning and development program for early career people in her corporation, and that was a treat. But I want to mention too that I believe in everlasting teaching, because I am back into another phase of my teaching, which Jackie has participated. I'm going to ask her about in a minute, where I've developed with Peter Vail, who was a very influential teacher for me in the early 70s when I was his doctoral student. He's reached out a few times. I reached out over the years. Then we finally connected and we collaborated on a shared passion for exactly who you see on screen, a practitioner of managerial leadership and learning. And others who are all sorts of practices beyond that. But that was our muse, to be thinking about, after we teach and present the theories, and hopefully they carry some with them, or at least know how to get to them. What do they do out there? How do they grow themselves? Because when you're in a state of practice, you are responsible to yourself to take every opportunity to set and achieve higher results. And some cases, organizations foster that. And that's what Jackie's vision was for the company where she was supporting those young career people. Teach the managers how to manage them so they will grow. But what I did with Peter, when he could no longer work on writing this manuscript, notes on practice, I said, well, Peter, let's do some podcasting. I had to learn what it was. He had to learn what I was getting him into. And we had 22 sessions with Peter and me recorded in that podcast called Practice with a question mark. One of the very first sessions where we added a third party, Peter Vail and I, was with Jackie. And it just happened to be on the last week she was working in this particular corporation and getting ready to start a new job. Jackie, what do you remember about that, particularly talking with Peter Vail? Because you knew what he meant to me.
Yeah, I think that was one of the, I think about from a generation standpoint, right? I mean, if we were to rewind this conversation, kind of how we started this whole session this afternoon, around, where did you start, right? This is David would be sitting in my seat and Peter would be sitting in his. And it was absolutely an honor to be considered as a guest for that conversation. And what I have found to be, it's like David sparkles when he was around Peter. And it was this, I could understand why, because the way that Peter was able to help you to see and have a conversation around some of the things that you almost took for granted, right? He was able to dissect it in a way that was very conversational, but very practical, because we need to talk about how the theory becomes actual practice. And so I was able to see at that moment, it was like an aha moment to say, this is how David became because of Peter. And these are the ways I saw Peter's ways and Peter's influence on David throughout his entire career as he showed up in all of the things that I was a part of when working with David, whether it was in the classroom environment, whether it was visiting those sites, whether it was, and you just alluded to it, but this very major project that we worked on together in a former employer, helping high potentials within the organization to develop. I mean, it was just, after meeting Peter, I realized what an enormous influence he made on his life.
And that's true. What you've from time to time you've checked in on the podcast. You've seen how I have 111 episodes up there, all 30 some minutes. Enough listening for a lifetime right now. I'm like the Sorcerer's Apprentice. You know, I just go out with my bucket and I bring in more interesting people and talk with them. But what do you think about me doing that? As my latest, and hopefully not my last, but most likely my last teaching enterprise.
I think it's a wonderful way to be able to kind of pull it all together. Your connections with people, even at this stage of your career, is actually growing. I mean, it's not, you know, these aren't, you know, you'd think, right? We all think as we start to, you know, think about retirement that, you know, your funnel gets smaller, but in fact, the way David says worked, it's gone this way. And you know, I sometimes send sympathy notes to his poor wife, but because she's ready to have him come home. It just doesn't work that way.
I next door saying, "Are you done with that damn computer?"
But it's an amazing way to actually be able to continue to make those connections for people in a way that's really accessible. So you may not necessarily be on campus any longer, making those, you know, direct connections with students, but you're in a place with this podcast where you can help to bring others in, to be able to bring ideas through and give people, again, the accessibility of those discussions. And, you know, again, technology allows us to say, hey, I like this one. This is the one I want to choose. This is the idea I want to learn more about. And furthermore, some of you may or may not know, but in terms of, you know, the adventures are not done. So we might see a little bit more from Doc as it relates to some of these things. So he's got, he continues to stir up the pot in terms of finding new ways to be able to get ideas out into this world for all of us to be able to enjoy.
Nothing up the sleeve. I hope so. I really do. It's rejuvenating. And Judy mentioned at the beginning that she and Joan and I and Joe are hosting, and Harvey Galotny are hosting a conversation about life after retirement from the professoriate. And I hope each of us, I know each of us is a role model for how you can keep the teaching in you. They don't take that away. They just take away your fancy title in your office. Oh God, I've lost all of that, haven't I? And that's really great because you find out what you really got. What is it going to make you get up and do? So it's a second test of whether I deserve this award. First, I put myself to the test with Jackie, and I'm going to turn you guys into a jury in a moment. And the other is that I tested myself to see if there's still another way that I could use my need to flap my wings and do something different. It's always been the problem. Miss Patch in the second grade set a record back in, that would have been 1946, 48, something like that. A record for how many times that she sent me to the cloakroom. I was such a pain in the ass because she didn't give me a chance to breathe. I'm left-handed. She made me try to color within the line. She would start a story and I'd think, well, what if they would try this? And she'd say, be quiet, David, I'm reading this. And it was driving me nuts. So to this moment, I'm 78, I can still smell wet wool and hear dripping jackets and old rubber boots that I would sit under and next to in that cloakroom to be put in, to be put right, as we used to say in Maine. So sorry, Miss Patch, you didn't get me. So Jerry, turn on your mics. Let's talk a minute. We've got some time. I put up the question, is teaching everlasting? I put up another question: is learning everlasting, or can it be? Can we have something to do with that? I also said, they said that I've had a lifetime focusing on teaching and learning excellence. Now you've heard our definition of excellence. What do you think? Anyone? Jury?
Are you going for Judy?
Jury.
Jury, that's my main accent. It could be Joe, it could be you. So what do you think?
I think learning is lifelong, and I think teaching is lifelong, and I don't think it's only in the classroom. I think as much teaching happens in my office and when I advise and as I'm with others.
That's a key point you've mentioned, Sue, because an awful lot of the changes that students make, they make while talking with us, and sometimes in private, so they can really, explore the best and the worst of their ideas. And I think of maybe a half a dozen in one of the programs that I was sponsoring with travelers, where this Judy will get it. Judy Strauss-Lipkin will get a kick out of this. I remember one young woman who said, I have to be in accounting. I have to do accounting. And we'd say, Jess, you don't have any aptitude for it. Look at these grades. You could lose your scholarship on it. Oh, I've got to do it. Why? I'm not sure. I just have to. And so she would cry. So I talked with my accounting faculty friends, and I said, let's be clear with her. She became a management major. Actually, the same human being just came out of her shell, and she loved the ideas, and she was interacting with everyone. 2 weeks ago, 8 years later, she got her law degree. Now, this young lady came from Nigeria, and she came a long way, and now she has a law degree. I don't think she would have graduated had she stayed in that accounting track. But those are the office conversations that can change lives. Have you had any of that nature?
I have, but I also advise clubs and do as much experiential learning doing projects there as I do within the classroom. Because you're a lot freer. There's not topics. You can really let it be organic in terms of what the opportunities present itself.
Well put, organic, which is how most life works when we're not trying to structure it into a course of study. Brittany, can I jump over to you for a minute? Because you were in that podcast a year ago. What do you recall of that experience, and have you ever listened to any of the others since?
Yes, I have listened to others since. And what do I recall from that experience? I think my initial impression was, why do you want to talk to me? And I think we even talked about that, because even here, in a lot of these sessions, I feel like I'm just kind of the observer, right? I'm early in my career. I have some teaching experience under my belt and advising. But I'm really just, trying to be a sponge and soak it in. So yeah, I think that was my first impression. But then going through it with you, it was actually good for me, because it was in the summer right before I would start teaching again in my PhD program, and it was like a self-esteem boost, really. And I think it was much needed. I do have something to offer. Yes, I am just a PhD student, but I do have something to offer to these students. So
yeah, I wouldn't let you use the word just more than once. But that's another point. I want everyone to know why I love working at Central Connecticut State and other schools of that nature, community college, which we helped start, school up in Western Maine. It's because I absolutely saw potential in everyone. And I'm not like, ooh, aren't you something? No, I do. It's in my nature. Mm-hmm. And why would I want to say, well, I'd love to I will try to get David Bradford on here. and do a podcast with me, that'd be great. And others who are very well known in our field. And that's good. That's useful. But I think it's altogether as useful to find someone who's working toward becoming someone in our field, teaching in our field. But Brittany was a bank regulator and had other experiences, which we call the practice world, right? And it's like, oh, didn't you give that any credit? You did some really amazing things while out in practice. And now you're in a place where you can help others, inspire others to recognize that it's okay to be in practice. It's not less than being an academic. And so that was a cool one. Joan, you've known me a long time. We've collaborated on webinars and done all kinds of cool stuff. What do you think? Have I passed the test for the book? Actually, you were one of the founders of the Bradford Award. So what do you think?
I don't know about you, but if Jackie's testament, I think you can say, yeah, you've passed. No, but I'm serious because there is a difference in people who have a lot to offer in terms of knowledge, but they don't care as much about who gets it and what they do with it. And that's the essence of your being, David, that you care about the person whom you are connecting with in whatever context it is. And I am not saying that as BS, I'm saying it truly sincerely because of the ways we've interacted. And the other one I would add is your podcast with Peter Vail was a new technology for you. And you just said, let's do it with him. And I'm not trying to equate them, but some years before that, David and I started a series of webinars before there were webinars that were popular. Yeah. And we asked people to participate in them and interview them and again, put them out. But it was the idea of, well, there's a need, there's something new that we can do. And that's in essence, again, of who you are. So I'll give you an A. I don't know whether I'll give you an A+ because I think great inflation is pushing everybody to it. But if anybody qualified, I'd say you do.
Spoken like a true Drexel professor. There is no plus on an A. David, you and I haven't met, but any thing to add to the order of this conversation?
And Brittany, I didn't mean to leave you out of it when I'm saying the proof of David is in the people whom he impacts.
I didn't know Brittany was coming, but Jackie was a setup.
Well, I would just say that in the words of kind of the modern student, especially athletes, game respects game. And so if you have your fellow colleagues who've seen the best and been among the best saying that you are, then I think that speaks for itself. I know, being a second year vMOBTS participant, that these have been some of the best video web sessions that I've experienced as an educator. And I would just say, it's like, wow, there are so many educators who are missing out on this kind of mentorship and apprenticeship, just even if they're not formal apprenticeships, and thinking about the kinds of, I'm hearing about this podcast for the first time and I'm thinking like, okay, I know what some of my homework is. And so I'm just thankful that you guys continue to stay involved.
Yeah.
You continue to stay involved, you continue to practice the practice, and you continue to deliver your learnings to the rest of us. So thanks.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Joe?
Well, I agree with virtually everything that was said, that your teaching style was really exemplified when you began to talk about your connection with students. That I've seen that over many years in many ways. But there's one story that I do want to tell. In 2008, you were the program chair for the at the time OBTC.
Babson College.
I guess sometime during that year, I was asked if I would be the program chair to follow you. And so I kind of spent extra time with you in 2008 trying to see what you were doing. And it wasn't like I didn't know the conference because I'd been to many by then. But there was also something a little bit different about being the one responsible for putting everything together. And so I spent a lot of time kind of just watching you very masterfully put together a really good conference.
Thank you.
And it gave me something to emulate for the next year. It was a model on which, and I had run other conferences in the past, but I'd never run an MOBTC with several hundred people, and of course face to face at the time, and a series of relationships with the local host school that were both easy and not so easy sometimes for me. And I remember going for a visit, and I want this room and this room and this room and this room for our sessions. And it was like, well, you can't have that room. And it's like, well, we'll put some of your sessions over in some other building. And it was like, no, that's not acceptable. This, we have to do, and the dean wasn't entirely happy with me, but managed to agree to do things the way I thought needed to be done. And I kept thinking of you as I went through that process, and it was like, you had figured out how to work all these things out.
Yeah.
And so they were workable. I mean, if I thought about it and spent some time on it, I could work out some of those problem areas. So I thank you for that. I don't think I ever told you that story before.
Oh, you haven't. And I must give credit to Keith Roleg, who was my Babson guy, who did a lot of that work. We were the first time they broke the program and facilities together, apart. So it was an experiment. I have to tell you, folks, that because of some of the collaboration we had back then, we got Chris Argyris to come for a plenary. We got Ed Shine to come for a plenary. We had Noel Tichy, who worked with, God, I'm having a moment here, Warren Bettis to come. And we had a lot of other wonderful folks from every strike. And just the other day, on LinkedIn, since I'm really pushing out and letting people know my interest in what they're doing regarding practice, I got a message from someone from India who said, I thought I recognized you. And I looked and I found out that I had attended that session at Babson. Mm. And he said, I never felt more welcome in the United States. He said, I come back and forth. He's a professor. He said, it was such a welcoming, friendly, dynamic time. And we all got on a boat, remember, Joan? We went out to Boston Harbor, and we're out there, and the moon, a huge moon, rose over the skyline of Boston Harbor. And everyone was cheering, and I said, just as I planned it. So, things do work out when you put your heart into it. So this is our last couple of minutes. Jackie, thank you. And other thoughts about what you think it means to you to see your old professor have this?
Thank you, because there's really no words that can really give credence to how much you've influenced my life, both personally and professionally. So it was extremely exciting to learn that finally you had been recognized as well by an organization that you have near and dear to your heart. So this is an exciting moment for me to be a part of this. And it's really, again, a pleasure to be able to meet all of you too, and the individuals that continue to be a part of who David is, because I've gotten a chance to be a part of it as well. So thank you. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you. Wow. you know, they say, you know, show us your impact, show us your product, show us what you've made. And I had this, I woke up not knowing what I was going to do with this hour. And I got a couple of seconds to explain this. Brandon reached out to me just a week or two ago, and I said, of course I'll have an hour. Of course I want to acknowledge the award for sure. What the heck am I going to do? And I woke up last Friday, Jackie, and I thought, I got it. And now, fingers crossed, I called, and we had a Zoom call anyway set up. And I said, would you do this? And what did you say, Jackie?
Absolutely. That wasn't even a question. I didn't even have to look at my calendar. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on, but
Yeah.
yes.
I said, I'll see that my two little boys are fed, and I'm available. And that was just wonderful. What a huge relief. And now I'm even further relieved because I have a record recorded of what the Baldrige, I used to be a Baldrige examiner, what the Bradford Award means to me, to my wife Connie, to Dave and Laura, my two adult children, and to my good friends who I see here on the screen and beyond. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
So we're done.
We're done.
Thanks a lot, David.
Thank you.
See you.
Thanks.
David, thank you for some nice comments. We got to get acquainted now. I'll see you in Jim's place.
Have your next podcast, that's for sure.
Yeah, I've got material. Every time I get this thing, oh, I got to add more people. But after 200 episodes, I'll start thinking maybe it's a little too much.
Well, then you'll go on to whatever's next.
Whatever's next. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because you want to continue to learn, you want to continue to teach, and you're always open to understanding what's going on around the world, around you. So it's whether it's the podcast, the technology, the webinars, or whatever you're doing, and saying, I'm going to do it. And that openness for other people, as Jackie said, and Brittany, that you respect your students.
Yeah.
And you find good in anyone. And sometimes that's hard to do.
It is. Thank God I was raised right. But I think, though, that, you know, every year we want to model this award with the best aspects of teaching we can discover in a fellow human being. And so my job tonight was to model my way of teaching. I don't particularly know how it came across, but it's okay.
Very well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Jackie, thank you again, and we'll talk very soon.
Congratulations.